Well, ladies and gentlemen, Superintendent Johnson said that one of the things that he wanted to have happen is to have somebody reach out in the community to those troubled folks or those folks who are involved in this. And we put together a panel this afternoon of those somebodies. We have some experts, expert in Chicago Public Schools, Jadine Chow. We have an expert in mental health issues in the community, in Peggy Flaherty. And we have three experts in the community, Reverends Johnson, Dukes, and Father Flager. And thank you for your work in the community. Thank you for helping. If you were depressed at all by our last panel, your spirits are going to be raised listening to what these folks are doing to help solve this problem. And Peggy, let me start with you if I can. You're an expert in the mental health issues which plague so many people. The police department has received training on how to identify and treat, handle, or arrest, whatever the word is, people with mental health. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Well, the police are offered crisis intervention team training, and they're trained on how to respond to people who are in a psychiatric crisis.
How many people have you trained?
I think it's getting closer to 30% of the force. And they're, what's wonderful is that oftentimes a family member or thresholds or a community provider counts on the police, depends on the police when a person is in crisis and needs to be hospitalized. Or the police, in fact, respond to a call from the community where the person has a mental illness. And the police are trained to de-escalate, to respond to that situation in a different way that their police training has given them. And we have found, I found at Thresholds, that since the implementation of CIT, I am much more confident that we're going to have a better outcome when we call the police. I've been with Thresholds 30 years, and when I was much younger, we were anxious about calling the police when a person was in crisis because we weren't confident that it would always have a great outcome, because we weren't confident of how a person would behave or respond to a police officer. Now I'm much more confident that we're going to have a much better outcome.
How are the police reacting to this training? Do they like it? Do they hate it? Do they avoid it?
Oh, I think that most people who've been through the training love it. We have people who are providing the training with lived experience, and they learn a lot from that role play. And right now, too, the police, CPD, is beefing up their mental health unit because it's not just about training. It's also about relationship and helping support those police to connect with the hospitals, with the providers. Oftentimes, if they come across somebody who has a mental illness, what to do. So I think there's a way to go, but we're on the right road.
It's a great issue that you raised, though, is the relationship between law enforcement and the folks in the community, and all of you are experts at that. Father Flager has a very interesting program, which I would love to see someday, where he gets, I think you said gang members and a tactical unit of the police department together to play basketball, and then what?
Yeah, I mean,
No fouls are called, I take it.
Well, let me just say this, Fred. The situation of violence that we see in our city that we should all be embarrassed by and be ashamed of. This is going on under our watch, but it is not beyond solving. It's beyond having the will to solve it. And I think on the front end, we have left many of our communities like third world countries. You look at the 15 or 16, I was listening to Alderman Sawyer, in the last 15 or 16 neighborhoods out of the 77 where the most of the violence is taking place. You'll see double-digit unemployment, underfunded, underperforming schools, most coming back from incarceration with $20 and a bus card and tell them to make it. Lack of options and opportunities, most foreclosures, most abandoned buildings, lack of economic development, and then this huge access to guns. And we see all this going on, and nobody seeking to help them. I'm glad for the.
Talk to us a little bit about the kind of a job that would attract a
About the
kid
what?
who's standing, a kind of a job that would attract a kid who's on the block, let's say, selling drugs and making $1,000 a day. What kind of a job can we give them that would
Well-
get them off that corner?
First of all, there is this perception that somebody's making $1,000 a day. They're not. I would be doing it if we were making $1,000 a day. Nobody's making $1,000 a day selling drugs.
That's right. That's right.
They're making it to buy McDonald's and to put hopefully something to help either their kids or their family. The reality, let me do it this way. We took 50 at-risk youth. I hate the term that's now become the socially acceptable term, opportunity youth. You can't call them opportunity youth if there's no opportunity. We have at-risk youth. There's 58,000 that the city says we have in Chicago, between 17 and 26, that are not at work and not in school. Now, I'm glad we're doing all the money for the band program and the mentoring of the band program, but if we're not doing something for the 58,000 that are not in school and not at work, we're not hitting the main target of the violence of the perpetrators and of those who are the victims. So we took 50 at-risk youth, started at last August, ankle bracelets, all had felonies, said let us try to take them in and mentor them, put the support in, the discipline, the structure in place, and let us see that we can turn lives around much cheaper than we're spending now to incarcerate, to feed, and to do medical expenses or to pay for funerals. We did that last August 1st, it kicked off. As of March 1st, 27 of them are in full-time jobs right now. 13 of them are in full-time, part-time, or 26 hours a week. And we could put more of them in full-time jobs right now, but we can't get companies to open up their doors and give them a chance. They're not looking to make $80,000 a year. They're looking to be able to live, pay their rent, pay their utilities, and take care of their food and take care of their family. That's all they're looking for. But the reality is, we say we're background friendly in this city. We are not background friendly. Background friendly means if you just stole a gun from Walgreens. I'm talking about background friendly. If you've paid your dues, and from the Bar Association, what we really need some help in is them coming out very strong and say, listen, if somebody has paid their time and they're free, they are now a citizen of Chicago like anybody else. Stop treating them for what they did. If you are white and rich and you come back out of prison for serving some term for stealing millions of dollars, you can get a job tomorrow.
Let me ask Jadine a question.
All right, let me shut
I
up.
think I should be congratulated for interrupting Father Flager, who I could listen to all day. I'm not a moderator. I'm called the Great Interrupter. Jadine, you are in charge of security for Chicago Public Schools. You have an enormous job and an enormous budget. Isn't it just a metal detector and then arresting whoever you catch and putting him in jail for 20 years?
So I joined Chicago Public Schools in 2011. Within 2 weeks of joining, I saw something that I could not have imagined. At 11 in the morning, one of our students was shot and killed. And so my first question was, 11 in the morning, shot and killed right across the street from the school. What was he doing outside? Does that school have open campus? The answer was no, it doesn't. But he was outside because he was suspended. He was suspended yesterday. And so he was just out there. And I said, well, aren't we in the business of keeping kids in school, like educating kids? And it seemed common sense to me, but I've learned over the years is that it's not common sense. And so there was a zero-tolerance system going on. There still is in many parts of the country. I just came back from D.C., and people were talking about bad kids and good kids.
What does zero tolerance mean?
Zero tolerance means sort of a one strike. If you have a cell phone that you refuse to turn over and you're having a bad day, you're grouchy, you have the risk of getting suspended or even worse, getting arrested. So when we saw this, we looked at the numbers at Chicago Public Schools. We have a lot of great advocates in the room who we appreciate to help us do this. We totally transformed our student code of conduct starting 2013. We ended up working through how do we stop calling the police on second graders? How do we stop calling the police, period, first of all? But second of all, how do we make sure that kids who are in a mode, from trauma, from what have you, how do we support them as opposed to enforcing the rules on them? So we transformed the code of conduct, number one. Number two, we worked with all of the adults in the building to make sure that all the adults understood this new culture we were striving for, which is instead of enforcing, how do we support our kids? So we have 1,300 security. First of all, when I got there, we had 2,500 security officers at CPS. We're down to 1,300, and the schools are safer, but we have fewer security officers. We don't need all those security officers in the school. But with those 1,300, we got student voice involved. The students told us, what do they want out of their security officers? They want to be safe. And so we worked with our security officers to develop a training program, worked with MICWA Challenge, worked with Kofi Power Pack, worked with all these different stakeholders to get a training program where they were supported. De-escalation, which we heard a lot about earlier with police. Building relationships, which we heard a lot about. All of these things were very important. The security officers, it wasn't easy. We had to break them down a little bit to help them reclaim their humanity. But once we got there, they understood, and now we're seeing the results. Can I just say the results?
You can. I also want to hear about your work on Facebook. You monitor some of your students on
Yeah,
Facebook.
I'll get to the discipline numbers
hurrying
first.
you along.
I hear it's good. 67% reduction in out-of-school suspensions since we launched this student code of conduct. 74% reduction in expulsions since we launched. 38% reduction in notifying CPD for incidents that are happening in our schools. The one thing on violence, and this is really important, we have been working with Department of Justice to understand social media and the causes it has on violence in our kids. It's bad. And so, you know, and again, I know you have a whole thing on it this afternoon, but I'll just give you a preview on what we're talking about in CPS. We see social media. We see our own children. These are children up there with guns. We see them up there flashing gang signs. We don't go to them and say, you're in trouble now. We go to them to help support them. So we will go to their house at night, 9 o'clock at night. We'll knock on their doors, and we'll say, what's going on? And we'll talk to their parents. We'll get that gun back. Here's the thing. Out of that, we have a jobs program. We connect them to services. 500 kids that we have put into jobs. And these are high-risk kids. 500 kids. You know how many of those have been victims of gun violence program to date? 1. And many of these kids have been victims prior to this. And so I share that I agree with Father Flager and everyone else who's probably going to talk about the importance of jobs. It's not just getting them a job. They can't walk into a Target or a Starbucks. They have backgrounds. And so we have to help connect them to opportunities that, until those laws change, until that whole mentality changes, get them connected to opportunities where they can do better.
You know, thank you. That was great. I'd like to ask all of you, you read in the newspapers that what we need are tougher laws. The legislatures in Springfield and the judges and the state's attorneys sometimes say, we have to get tough. We have to get tough on these kids who have guns, who get guns. We have to send them to jail for 20 years, and then they'll stop using guns. You folks agree with that theory?
No.
Does punishment in prison deter crime, this kind of crime?
Well, I can respond to that, no. First and foremost, what the challenge is, when we are incarcerating young people, we are already setting them up for failure. Unfortunately, our culture is of such that when we engage young people at the level of criminality and deal with that at that level, and I was even thinking even further, I look at it from the standpoint that at 3rd grade, young people are already being introduced to violence. Our culture says that, you know, all this violent stuff, they have it in the media, they have it on TV, the movies, all this other stuff. When I was growing up, in Inglewood, by the way, my mom would not even allow me to have a toy gun in the house. And unfortunately, because our culture says it's okay, young people are seeing this violence that's taking place, they're being introduced to it at an earlier age. As a result of that, ultimately end up in a situation where they get incarcerated, institutionalized, and then they go on to the big prisons or the big jails. So we have to address it, I would have to believe, earlier on and address it at the level of young people at the 3rd grade level. That's what my proposal is.
How do we address it?
I would say in terms of, let me even go a step further. When I grew up in the neighborhood, there was what I call my dear, auntie, big mama, and grandmama, and granddaddy, and everybody in the house, in the neighborhood were my parents. So before I got home, they had already corrected me in terms of my behavior. So one of the challenges is that the earlier panelists indicated about, you know, where are the parents in all of this? We have to make them accountable as well and be responsible, because unfortunately they can't, at the level of when the kids get to the school, They may be there only 6 hours. The other 18 hours, whatever happens in that school environment can be undone in the 18 hours that they're back in the home.
Reverend Dukes?
I'm a strong believer that the community must take responsibility for it. Today, when I walked in the room,
Sorry, define community.
well, community. This is a community today. When I walked in the room, we became a community of being in this room. When I walked in this room, it was freezing cold, and everybody in the room was adjusting to the cold without anybody saying, "Turn off the air." That's the nature of violence. We huddle together, we have small meetings, we have chats at our table about how cold is in the room, but somebody needs to get up and say, "Hey, turn down the air, it's not 85 degrees today." We had a lot of small conversations. We got a lot of people putting on jackets. We got a lot of people huddling, but nobody is getting together to solve the problem of just simply turning off the air conditioning. And this is the issue. Me and Father Flake fought this diligently. We have trains that go through our community, and it's common practice that they say assault weapons get stolen from these trains. If a lion was escaped Lincoln Park Zoo, they'll shut the whole Lincoln Park down to find the lion. But you don't shut down Inglewood when 50 guns have been stolen from a train. There's something fundamentally wrong with what we consider danger in different communities and neighborhoods in Chicago, and that's a community issue.
Father Pfleger, I'm coming back to you. I want to talk about prison sentences. I want to talk about people who are committing this violence being held accountable. Superintendent Johnson and others said that that's what we need. I'm not convinced that sending a 17-year-old to jail for 20 years convinces other 17-year-olds not to do the same thing. Are you?
No, I'm not, and I'll tell you why. It's because I think it's always the easy rush to go to lock up and incarcerate. That's all, that was what happened when Clinton was in the presidency. I think we're back at this today. Law and order, lock them up, put them away longer. I just want to see, before, first of all, I have not seen any statistics.
But what do we do if we don't do that?
Okay,
What's our option?
let me say this. I have not seen statistics that works. I've not seen any statistics that saying that's worked. What I'm saying is before we go to lock up, why run over opportunity and prevention and for young people before we get to the situation of locking them up? Why aren't we doing something about easy access to guns in this country? Why aren't we doing something about the 75% of cases right now where nobody is locked up or caught? To me, the biggest deterrent is not so much longer sentences for those you catch. If a person says there's a 75% chance of me getting off if I shoot somebody, that's not a very big deterrent. If we had 90 or 95% people locked up who did shoot and who did kill, and we were doing it on the front, on that end, doing the opportunities, doing something with guns, I don't think we got to jump. Let's jump to the incarceration time after we've done the other things first, but we don't do that.
Right, but we're stuck in that situation now where we're convinced that long jail sentences keep violence down.
But there's not evidence or proof of that
There's
anywhere,
not.
number one. Number two is,
Didn't we try this in the war against drugs? Didn't we try this in the 80s where we locked up everybody?
I am probably the most anti-gun person in the whole world. I hate guns. But my feeling is this. I know young people that pick up a gun to go to school and to go home. I know kids that hide them. There's no bullets in them, but they let them see so that they can, everybody knows I might have a gun going home, because they live in fear in their neighborhoods where we don't have post-traumatic stress in Chicago. We have present traumatic stress in Chicago. Our kids live in a war zone every day. And until we fix that, again, we're jumping to the end of the road rather than saying, how do we stop the climate where somebody's picking up a gun?
No, you're right. And actually, Jadine tried to do that, or is doing that in the Chicago Public Schools when she eliminated that zero tolerance. And apparently, it's working for you?
Yeah, it's absolutely working, and I wanted to just also chime in. Someone was talking earlier about just, I think it was Alderman Sawyer was talking about loving our kids. We have a program right now, I was talking about the jobs program. I just want to tell a quick story in terms of what motivates our kids to walk this way versus taking maybe a more negative route. It doesn't take a lot. And so we had, at one point, 200 jobs, 100 jobs on the south side, 100 jobs on the west side. I asked my team, go out, recruit the kids that are, kids that we've been working with, kids who we may have had some challenges with. They went out, south side, used the script. We had a script that says, we believe in you, we're proud of you, and as a result, we want to give you this job. On the south side, they got 100% take rate. On the west side, they only got 50% take rate. What happened on the west side? Essentially, they flipped the script. Okay, I'm a control freak. They did it. I said, you flipped the script. What they started with was the money instead of the dignity. They said, the kids are like, I can make much more money on the streets. I don't need this job. So we went back to those kids, do the script right, start with the dignity, and guess what? All the kids who turned us down came around. They just want to be valued, as we all do. And so we ended up getting 100% take rate into that. And again, that's the statistic I had earlier with all those kids being safe.
That's great. You three are very involved in your churches in the community. You do the Lord's work, and we're very appreciative of it. Would you tell us what the role is of the churches in the community to stop this?
Well, as a faith leader, I think we need to clearly help people with the whole concept of faith and hope. The concept of hope is the admission that something is wrong. You don't have to have hope when everything is okay. You only have to have hope when there is despair. But as it relates to faith, tell this real brief story about my daughter. I raised 3 kids by myself, grew up without a father. And one of the things I promised myself is that when I get older, I was going to take my children on vacation. And so I had took my kids to North Dakota to go skiing. A black man and 3 black children in North Dakota skiing is a monumental task. But the other 2 boys, my other 2 boys, they just naturally were skiing. And my daughter said, hey, Daddy, I want something that the boys don't know how to do. And she looked up at the wall and seen a man feeding ducks. And she said, I want to do that. I said, early morning, we'll get up and go down. We'll feed ducks. We got up in the morning, got bread. We left out. We was in North Dakota. It was freezing. And Father Flake, I said to her, y'all pray for me. I said, just let's say we went out there and fed the ducks. She said, no, Daddy, you said we were going to feed ducks. Halfway up the trail, I said, look, let's just go back. We came out. She said, no, we going to feed ducks. We got to the bridge, and she started throwing bread into the pond. And guess what happened? Ducks showed up. We got back to the cabin, and my oldest son said, where y'all been? He said, we've been feeding ducks. He said, you lying, you ain't been feeding no ducks. There's no ducks out there. He ran up to the pond, came back. He said, I told y'all there were no ducks. She said, you don't know how to feed ducks. He said, how do you feed them? He said, you got to feed them even though you don't see them. That's the responsibility of the church, to keep feeding, to have faith that if we keep investing in the community, even though we don't see it, that it'll be a return. And when the church does that, the community responds. And that's, I think, as long as we're putting it out there without even ever seeing evidence, that sooner or later ducks will come and then other people will join in.
What about it, Reverend Johnson? You attract any ducks?
Yeah.
How do you do it?
I think for me, not only is it about faith, but it's also creating opportunities. We can talk about it on a Sunday morning when we have an audience as pastors and preachers and ministers. But what do we do and what do people do the 6.5 days of the week in order to survive, to get through the other week or other part of the week? And so I know Father Flager, Bishop Dukes, several other persons around the city are engaged in providing opportunities for young people as well as adults. So what we try to do, at least in our church, is create opportunities around after-school programs. I think it's important that we have more after-school programs for young people to be engaged in. Of course, we know that there are those who are out there who may not be a part of those programs who are creating, unfortunately, the negative things that are happening in our community, but we can't give up on that. We also have to look at, the parents and the adults that are out there in the community. As I work with Safe Passage and Jadine Child, the unfortunate thing is that we have so many people out there who are working, Yet and still, what about the other opportunities for those
What's
who
Safe
may not be?
Passage? Tell us
So
about Safe
Safe Passage, so I'll even go a step further. Back in 1997, when I actually met Father Flager, I actually pastored over in Cabrini Green, which is totally gentrified from when I was there. Because when I was there at Wayman AME Church on the near north side, there were folk who would not even come and visit me at church because the reds, the whites, the row houses, folk could not cross certain boundaries, schools, et cetera, and so forth. So we were able to start a walking school bus that was actually the precursor for now what we call Safe Passage. What ended up happening was we were able to provide opportunities not only for those parents. So example, persons that are in public housing, at home, watching Jerry Springer in the afternoon. We said, guess what? You can come and watch your babies go to school. We will provide opportunity, which was actually initially given to us by way of Chicago Public Schools as a small grant to be able to hire parents who are also TANF clients. So what we were able to do, it was to create a sense of safety in the near north neighborhood. As a result of that, I've still been doing the work. We are the third largest Safe Passage vendor with Chicago Public Schools, employing over 100 and some persons to go out there in the mornings and the afternoons to be able to make sure that the babies are safe going to and from school.
Does it
and
work?
so it's
Does it
important.
work?
Huh?
Does it work?
Oh, absolutely, it does work. And we
why?
know,
Tell me why it works.
because we know that there are persons who are committed in the community to make sure that the babies are safe. Those who are out there maybe causing and creating violence see these persons out there and they're less inclined to do anything because they know that these persons out here are committed to making sure that the children are safe.
But let me just add something. The contrast to the Safe Passage program on the south side is a community like Lincoln Park with Lane Tech on the north side. They don't have Safe Passage. They have a thing called businesses. And the businesses around the school keep the kids safe because those kids are the consumers to those businesses. And so Safe Passage, which I'm part of and advocated for, you have to put it in perspective that on the north side, these kids got business. So when they closed 50 schools in Chicago, it should have been businesses around all those schools in an uproar. But we have closed campuses. We don't have businesses around our school, which goes to the whole capacity of how do we employ people in the community when the school system in itself does not have a community, once again, that can employ people from the community. So we have to look at that and say, what is the question? My daughter went to Lane Tech. Every day I gave her $7 to go to school, $2 to get on the bus, $5 for lunch. It's 4,000 kids go to Lane Tech. That's $20,000 a day that those kids are spending on lunch. There's nowhere in the world that Lane Tech would have ever been closed down. The community would not allow it to close down because of the economic connection to it. So just like Father Flager said, you got economic resources, you got a healthy school, and now you got a healthy community. And now you don't have less violence. It's not just because Lincoln Park is on the north side, it's because there's a community that employs, helps. And now you got a Kinko's, you got Mariano's, Jewel's. If Jewel's and Mariano's could get along next to each other, anybody could get along next to each other. All of these are right there in that community because why? Because the economic dollar is circulating in that community and it gets back to the children and the children get opportunity. And that creates a safe passage.
Representing Chicago Public Schools, I completely understand the concern that you just raised, Bishop Dukes. And one of the challenges we have is the mobility. The children choose to travel outside the community, and so we do have a lot of schools right now that are way underutilized, and that is a challenge for the community and for the infrastructure. One of the things, though, that I just wanted to talk about with Safe Passage, though, one of the reasons that it's so successful, it builds on what we talked about earlier with the security officers, is we work with the organizations. We use St. Sabina under Father Flager, as well as AME under Reverend Johnson's. Essentially, we are building a relationship between the community members as well as the children. And so these kids have come to really rely on the presence of these trusted adults. They have relationships. If Mrs. Smith is not there on her corner on Friday, they're like, oh my gosh, is she, did something happen? They're looking for her. And that reliability, and it's an unfortunate reality. And until the economic development and the job opportunities, as that's getting settled out, and as the laws are getting settled out, we have an immediate concern. And I respect what was said earlier about the signs. I hate those signs too, quite honestly, in the sense that, you know, every path should be safe. In the meantime, though, we have to fight what we have in front of us, and that Safe Passage Program. 1,300 community members. They don't make a lot of money. Every day they go out there dedicated in the polar vortex, in the hot summer. They are not wearing any protection. They are wearing a vest that says, I care about these children. And that program has been successful. And one thing on results, Reverend Johnson did not say it. Since the inception of the program, and since we've been tracking it in 2011, we have not had one child, not one child, seriously injured. When I say seriously, you know, we have kids who have fallen down, so forth. We have not had one child shot, not one child beaten, not one child who's been injured during the point where these workers have been en route. And I think that, again, I commend all the community members who've stepped up and said, I support these children. I'm going to put myself in the situation, and yeah, it's a little risky sometimes, but I'm going to do it because someone's got to take care of these
Now, is
children.
this an argument that you need more police in these neighborhoods?
No. I think we need more community members to step up and have an opportunity to basically be in the community to provide safety and support. I think, unfortunately, what we've had, you know, I'm for police, but more police and more policing is not going to get us out the situation that we're in. I think community members, and again, this is an opportunity for just, you know, whatever it is in terms of 1,300 people who are in the community, who are vested in the community, who have opportunities to provide safety and support. And again, their moms, their dads, their aunts and uncles who are there, and they're committed, respective and regardless. Even I can say publicly, if it's okay with JD, it's $10.50 an hour that these persons are making, but yet and still they're committed. It's not about the dollar, it's about their commitment to the babies being safe.
Yeah. Father Pfleger, I need to just check in with you on your Bread on the Waters plan in St. Sabinus. Are you able to attract young people to the church and kind of mentor them? I hate that word, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, we deal right now through our Peace League, which was the hook. We started 6 years ago. We started out inviting 4 gangs. I don't really like to call them gangs. I like to call them organizations because lawyers are a gang.
But we're a nice gang.
Priests are a gang. Yeah. Catholic Church is the biggest gang I know. So we're all gangs. I mean, if we start to really identify people like that. We know the city council's a gang, Rod, so. So we started with a basketball. We took 4 gangs, BDs, GDs, Stones, Killer Wards, said we're going to have a basketball tournament, bring you in to play in the court, get to know each other. Each gang had their own team. Move forward, and we get them in, and not only to talk to them, we have life skills courses with them, we feed them once a week, we have talk about them, then get them in, we teach 2 GED classes. So if you do not know, if you haven't got a high school diploma, we put you in a GED class in order to play in the league. Then we try to help you get a job, summer job, and then year-round job. But we moved ahead 6 years now. Now we're to 8 teams, and now we have 6 gangs involved, and we started 3 years ago to go to a draft. So on every team, there's 3 to 4 different gangs on every team. Because now you want to win basketball. So you may be a GD and I'm a BD, but guess what?
We want to win.
I'm going to get Dukes because he plays better ball than you do, and he's in another gang, but we're going to get together and we're going to win. And then they become the training of them and the conflict resolution and the training of them for respecting each other and turfism. Then they become the emissaries to go out and get the other people, the emissaries for that. So now we started out with going to the shorties because they're the ones causing most of the stuff out here. So we now started 4 teams with 14, 15, 16-year-olds. Now we're still having to pick them up and bring them there. But we're watching
why do you say
because
that?
they can't cross gang turfs.
What happens? You mean a street they can't cross?
No, yeah, they can't cross Ashland Avenue, or they can't come from Foster Park, or they can't come from 76 and Halsted, because those turfisms that exist. So our intention is over the next 2 years, we're no longer going to have to pick them up, but we're going to start the same thing at draft with the younger guys, but it takes a process of building it. We get 25 tickets to a Bulls game. We take 5 members from each of the different gangs that go together in the two vans, and then they have to sit together, hang out together, as they break down those perceptive barriers, like with any of us. But again, you know, at the end of the day, can I do this real quick story? I took 4 guys who were fighting and shooting a year ago. I mean, and these were shooters in the street over 78th, 79th block of Marshfield, called the Kittle Ward. I got them in my car and I said, let's drive down this block. We're going to talk about everything going on in this block. We're going to write it down. Tell me, look on that side, you take that side. Abandoned building, boarded up building, vacant lot, front door kicked in. We went this whole block, wrote it all down. I said, all right, come on. Now we're going to go someplace else. I drove down to LaSalle Street and parked in front of City Hall. And policeman said right away, you can't park here. I said, these guys are really dangerous. Just give me 5 minutes. I don't know what they might do if we have to move. Policeman said, stay as long as you want. And I got out and I said, see that up there? On the 5th floor is the mayor. The 2nd floor is the alderman. They decide what's happening on Marshfield. They decide what's happening in Auburn Gresham and Englewood and Lawndale and Roseland. They said, across the street, that's the State of Illinois building. Not too much of anything happens there anymore. But over in that building there is where the money comes from to give to the 5th floor of this building, which the alderman then decide how it's going to be broken up in the city. This is what you want to fight for. So we get back in the car, very silent, go get something to eat, come back home, drop them off. The guy says to me, I get your point, Father Mike. I get your point, but understand something. This shit here, this is all we got. So you're going to fight to hold on to what you got, even if it's nothing. Yeah. As long as we continue to treat our communities like third world countries, you put 2 lions in a cage and don't feed them, one's going to eat the other. You cage whole communities in with no equal resources of jobs and opportunities and stores and businesses like Duke was talking about and the rest, they're going to turn on each other. It becomes a survival of the fittest. And that's not the gang's problem. That's our problem.
That's right.
We create the atmosphere.
Let me switch subject for just a second, Peggy, and go back to you. If you have a serious mental health condition, can it lead to you being violent? Or maybe put it a different way, are people who are repeat gun offenders who randomly shoot people on the street, do they necessarily have a mental illness or a mental defect?
No, people with serious mental illness are no less likely to commit a crime with a gun than any of us. So that is, there are these mass shootings that happen, but that's just a very small percentage of the gun violence in the country. Most of the people with serious mental illness are victims of crimes.
Right, I see. I'd also like to ask all of you about mentorships that we hear so much about. Some people say that is going to cure this problem if we can only give every troubled youth. By the way, let me ask another question first. Do girls are they involved in gun violence, or is it just the guys? Uh-oh, the air conditioner went out. It better not get real hot in here. See, all you got to do is ask, and we take care of it. I pushed a button.
The girls are involved in gang violence. We are one of the schools that we mentor a young lady. You can see the transformation from her 8th grade picture, cap and gown. 2 years later, they was calling her Snoop off of the show on The Wire. By the time she was 15, they had to credit her with 8 homicides. And by the time she was 16, she was dead. This is a young lady. And lead into your question about mentorship, we need some more ships. We need fellowships, internships, scholarships. We just don't need just one boat. We need a whole bunch of ships. That's right. Because if you don't have internships, we got kids that we send away to college, have going away parties, Trump parties, the rest of the kids calling him college boy. They go to University of Illinois, Southern, HBCUs. 70% of them are back home by Christmas. 85% don't go back after spring break. So what was supposed to be our best and brightest, when we sent them away, is right back on the corner with what we sent them away from within the first year. With internships and fellowships and scholarships, then it would have been somebody on the University of Illinois campus that embraced them when they got there. When they come home for summer, we wouldn't be praying for their life. They can have an internship at one of the city schools or law firm or any of those things where when they come back, that we intern them and keep them safe. So we needed things behind that. And my last statement on mentorship, mentorship has become a catchphrase for solving community problems, but you cannot make a relationship of mentorship happen just because you give me $9 and now you tell me I got to be your friend. It has to be some mutual interest and some mutual gathering together. We had a program where our mutual interest, and I was telling Father Flake when we was talking about basketball, where we took transfer labels. We had young people in school that was interested in dogs. We had police that had dogs. We had a trainer who trained dogs, and we had community people that loved dogs, and we created a dog program, paid the kids to learn about dogs. When Michael Vick came to Chicago, people thought he was coming to sign up with the Bears. Actually, he was coming over to our dog program, and on every Wednesday night, we had over 65 to 100 community people as dog owners, not gangbangers, not police, but they became a different title that brought them together. And now we could create mentorship opportunities through a program that brought us together because we got a common goal or a common love, which is dogs. So I think we need more than just that one ship. We need some more ships to create great opportunities.
What about mentorships, Reverend Johnson? Where do you find the mentors, by the way?
Well, they're in the community. I think the thing is that it's important that we do identify mentors. I think it's important that we also identify mentees. I think it's important that not only do we engage mentors, but also in the mentees, but also, as Bishop Dukes just talked about, the relationship. We are part of this new initiative, the Mayor's Mentoring Initiative that was rolled out in the last couple of months. And prior to this initiative being rolled out, we were already doing mentoring because we know that mentoring works. When people are committed in the community to work with young people, when they are committed, and I also want to not just isolate it to an African-American male issue and problem, we also need female mentors working with mentees as well. In my church, what we talk about all the time is while we are focusing on African-American males, there are females out there who need mentoring as well, because some of us know in the church, there was a Big Mama again, and others who were in that church who worked with those young ladies to assist them in terms of skill sets that is missing and lacking in terms of community and in the church as we speak. So we need both of that. We need both mentors, mentees, males and females, young people, both sides of the equation.
Janine, mentorship?
Yeah, I'm obviously pro-mentorship.
How do you get them? How do you arrange it?
Well, it's all about finding that committed person. It's not a job. And I think that a lot of people who don't see it in the works, they think, we put out a help wanted and all these people apply. You really have to work with the communities to find those adults who really are committed, because you will see some really bad stuff. And as someone who sees things every day, I will tell you, it comes home with you. It haunts all of us, the things that you experience. And so when you recruit mentors, and I'm looking at Michelle Morrison from Youth Guidance, who helps us with Becoming a Man and working on womanhood, both mentor programs that we have inside of CPS, among others. These are people who put themselves really kind of on the line and say, I'm raising my hand, just essentially just taking that chance because I want to save children. And they bring that trauma home with them as if they've experienced it themselves. And I sat with a bunch of Becoming a Man mentors the other day, and just one after another, they told me the things that our children are going through, a lot of which I knew already, but just to hear the mentor talk about it and see the trauma that mentor was experiencing. It really hits home. It's making a difference, but we do have to support the adults as well as the children.
Father Mike, I've got a question for you, and there's a bet that 50-50 you won't answer what I ask, you'll say something else, but I'm going to try it anyway.
50, about 75,
That's
25.
what I thought. I was being generous. In fact, you might answer it before I ask it. I don't know. So here's my question. If I gave
a mean
you,
group.
Not mean, but if you were given unlimited funds, what is the one thing that you would do with those funds? You can't do 15 things. You can only do one thing. What would it be?
If I was given $1 million in funds,
Let's say 5 million.
5 million, can that happen before I leave here today? Because
We'll take a, we'll
no
take
sense
a,
me answering
we'll
it.
pass a hat. But you can
No,
only
I
do
mean,
one,
I would-
only do
I-
one thing with it.
Okay, if I could do one thing, I would take a community like where I'm at and say, how are we going to do this to try to build some economic development, some tutoring and educational support, and some opportunity and options for young people? How we could take this and invest this to show, only to show, to say, if you put the investment in, you're going to see the results from it. And I think everything now is data-based. So let's take it and step in. We can't do much data if we don't have the money and the funds to do it.
Right.
But if we can take that and we show in this area, we're going to turn this area around and see how it changes the thinking, changes the lifestyle, it changes the options, and put that in an area and divide that up to do that in education and opportunity and jobs, and I think you'll see a change.
All right, I have a question from the audience. Are you ready? How do you create inclusion in your resources for youth with disabilities, especially for victims of violence?
Well, one of the things that we always talk about the number of youth killed. Very seldom do we hear about the ones who actually survive. And what resources are available to those who survive, because me and Jadine, we was working at Harper School, one of the kids, they announced the valedictorian or salutatorian. They got minimum amount of claps, and then the other guy, they said his name, and the audience went crazy. I was like, what did he do? They said, well, he got shot. And it was like a badge of honor. But the trauma that goes along with that disabled kid or the kid who has suffered the violence, there are no resources. There is no resources for that family. Sandy Hook, when those kids got killed in Sandy Hook, they got counseling and all type of service for the next 7 years. Yep. In the near future, in 30 years from now, it's going to be a kid that's going to raise from Sandy Hook, going to run for governor as a survivor of Sandy Hook. Where's the survivor of when the kid got shot in Inglewood or Martin Luther King? What happened to them? Those kids in Sandy Hook end up singing with Jennifer Hudson at the Super Bowl. Our kids not even singing at the parade.
Yeah, that's right.
So when we start talking about resources, there are none for us to give. Just simple things we'll ask, and this body can help us with. It's just like virtual visitation. We want to have ability that you could go to a faith-based institution and visit your loved one while they still incarcerated 2 years prior to them being released. So now a father or a mother can read a story, see their kid's report card, and then you can have a relationship with your child before you get out of jail. But we can't even get into the system through legislation for us to allow us to visit your kid without having to drive six hours down there. So resources, they're not there. So we can't talk about using things that are not actually in place.
Right.
Yeah, so, again, Chicago Public Schools, we have almost 400,000 kids. So when you read a story in the paper about a child being impacted by gun violence, either the child of, someone who has been killed, or a child who's friends or siblings of somebody, or someone who's a victim themselves, every day, these things come into the school, even though they don't happen inside of the school. We haven't, just so y'all know, we have not had an incident of gun violence inside of a CPS school in 25 years. However, the impact of what's happening outside of the schools is really, is coming in and just impacting us every single day. So we have built behavioral support teams. In some cases, they're in the school where we have the resources. Where we don't have the resources, we are able to triage and we're able to provide those necessary supports. These kids cannot focus on their schoolwork. None of us would be able to, going through the kind of things that these kids are going through. And so we recognize the need. We do need more we always need more resources to support these needs so that these children can get through that trauma. That trauma doesn't go away. It's just how do they manage through it so they can just cope and essentially survive.
Well, I have a question for you. It's going to put you on the hot seat. Are you ready?
Me?
It's from the audience.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? it says there's often overrepresentation of minority students in detention rooms, or suspension, expulsion of those students. Well, you get it. What's the answer to that?
Yeah, the answer is that disproportionality is very real.
Tell us why.
So well, I don't know. It's what we live, so it's sort of, again, sort of my world, but we live in a world where there's implicit racial bias. We live in a world where children are punished for things that essentially, if in this neighborhood, if a child is acting up or maybe says something defiant to a teacher, their consequence would be handled one way versus where their consequence would be handled differently here. Because CPS Public Schools is working to make people aware of this implicit racial bias. We're only starting this, but we're about to ramp up really quickly. We're looking at training all of our security officers, all 1,300 of them, on implicit racial bias, which
Tell
will
us what
help them.
implicit racial bias is.
It's when, and everybody has some sort of bias, we'd be fooling ourselves if we didn't, when your brain takes a shortcut on making a decision. So if I see a fire, my shortcut in the brain, I don't need to touch that fire to know that it is hot. Some people jump to conclusions. If they see a child walking down the street, a child, let's say, of color, they might make assumptions. Do I grab my purse more? Do I cross the street? What have you? Versus another child in another neighborhood was, oh, that looks like a student that might be on their way to college, what have you. Make these assumptions, and that's not right. And so what's happening in our schools, and I say everybody does it, everyone has biases, but it's how we respond to them, and we only respond to them when we're aware of them. And so in training the security officers, also working with our talent office to train principals, because it starts at the top. If leadership says we're not going to tolerate these biases and we're going to start working to remove that disproportionality, only then can we try to level the playing field. Again, we're not, as CPS, we're not as in control of what's happening with the investments and the economic developments in the community, that we'd love to be more involved with that. We are in control of what's happening inside the walls of our school with the discipline, and the least we can do is help our children through these issues and not punish them in a way that really is not their fault.
You know, that raises this question that I have for all of you. Let's talk about police-community relations. Let's talk about the way the police treat the young people that they are dealing with every day. And let's talk about how the young people treat the police. Has there been any change? Has it gotten worse? Do you see any hope? Just talk to us about that.
I would say Judge Miriam Ahmad and I were talking about it. Unfortunately, in our community, and some of us have participated in trying to de-escalate situations and trying to do training around with young people's groups to talk about how to engage and disengage with police officers. But there is an implied situation of fear that automatically, because of historic and decades-long stuff that have happened between, unfortunately, uneven relationships between young people and police, they're automatically going to run from the police.
Does it matter if the police man or woman is black or white?
Doesn't matter. They see that blue and white car, they're going to automatically start running. And the unfortunate part about it in our community, especially on the south sides and west sides, that's more prevalent than anywhere else. So when the police car rolls up and there are young people who might just be out there just talking, but automatically it's assumed that they're getting ready to do something just by the mere fact that they're just standing there on a corner. And chances are, if they feel somewhat a little bit threatened, they're going to automatically run. And so what we try to do, at least in our church, and I'm certain Father Pfleger, Bishop Dukes, others are trying to do, is to hopefully try to talk to your young people about, you know, how to approach the police. Because even if you throw your hands up, there's a possibility that there still may be something happening. But hopefully, prayerfully, you follow the police orders, policeman's orders and directives and respond accordingly.
I think one of the hardest jobs we ever had to promote was to be a police officer. We, young people, we had 200 summer jobs, and we went around the community and, hey, how many kids can you hire? How many kids can you hire? And we was giving them jobs out. Hey, you want to be at Walgreens? We got down to the last 20 or so jobs. We had 10 at the funeral home and 10 at the police department. And I asked the kids, I said, hey, you all got to pick something. And so one of the kids raised their hand and said, what you got to do at the funeral home? I said, well, you got to put socks on dead people. They said, we'll take that. So they would choose death over being related to the police. That's a major statement. And then in the school, we talk to the kids at Harper, and we ask the kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Out of 400 kids, none of the kids said they wanted to be a teacher or a police, and they see them every day. They got to walk past the police to get into school, and then they got to sit with a teacher. And so it's a disconnection between the police and the community in such a way that it's so greatly divided that there needs to be a mediator. And I think lawyers can be that type of mediation. Because whether you're rich or poor, everybody claims to have a lawyer. You know, so I'm going to call my lawyer. Everybody got a lawyer. I don't know how everybody got one, but everybody got a lawyer. I'm going to call my lawyer. Well, I think that's a good place since we sitting in here, that's a good mediation because people still trust their lawyers, but they may not trust the police. And the mediation between the two, I think this is a great segue to help the community in that conversation through those who are in the legal field to help, because there is a great divide and a great distrust between the two of them.
And so I just wanted to add, so last night some of us had dinner together, and I met Pamela Means, who y'all heard from in the first panel, and we were talking about a program that we're doing in Chicago Public Schools with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, which is called Know Your Rights. It's essentially the law in your community, which helps young people in CPS work through building relationships while understanding their rights. It's delivered by CPD officers. It's 8 weeks. It always starts out the same way, which is the kids are in the classroom and they just do not want to be there. They just say, I'd rather be in math class than this class. Within 2 or 3 weeks, again, because the officers who do this, they want to be there because they want to build relationships. Kids can sense that. By 3 weeks, they start to get to know each other. By 8 weeks, they are hugging each other. They don't want to see the program end. The only reason I bring up Pamela Means is because when we were talking about it, she says, I wrote that program. And what was so exciting and impressive about this is that program is not about how do the young people have to act? How do you have to act when you are confronted with police? It's about how does everybody have to act? And so it helps the adults, the police officers who are going through that training, also are learning from the young people. And so the young people are sharing their experiences. How do I feel as a child who is in a neighborhood, say like Englewood, how do I feel when I'm just walking down the street? I'm not doing anything, and a police officer rolls up on me and just says, you know, what are you doing here? So that experience really hits the police officers as well, and that's why we love this program so much, and we're expanding it. We have 15 schools, which is a very small number right now, but every year we have the commitment from Superintendent Johnson to try to double the number of schools that are in it, because we have a waiting list, so.
Father
I wanna
Mike,
share
you're
that.
doing something to help improve communications between the kids and the police, aren't you?
Yeah, we try to do with the officers in the 6th District is, again, we used the basketball as a hook. We took the TAC unit, which most deals with young brothers in the street, and we took guys from 4 different gangs and played ball together. And then after we played ball together, we went downstairs, gave everybody something to eat, closed the doors, and said, now let's put everything on the table. Let's be honest with each other about the problems we see. And then we spent another hour doing role-playing, where the TAC guys were the guys standing on the corner, and the brothers were the police rolling up on them.
I bet they were tougher than
It was
police.
very interesting. We made all of them take their guns off first.
Both sides.
Everybody, both sides, yeah. But I think the relationship we know is broken. It's broken. We got to admit that, first of all. But then we've got to create experiences in every district where we begin to build this bridge back together. It's not going to just happen.
Was it ever a bridge?
Was it ever good?
A bridge?
But there was
Yeah.
a bridge, but I don't think, you know, in my life, I've never seen it as bad as it is right now. It's worse than I've ever seen in my life in terms of this brokenness.
How much do the kids contribute to this bad relationship?
Oh, I mean, it's 50-50. I mean, it's on both sides. But at the same time, and then that's why I think, you know, Dean, the program you're talking about now, I've always been this one saying we have thousands of kids in schools, public, private, charter, parochial, Why are we not doing programs in our schools, a conflict resolution, of peacemaking and of respect? But why are we not
Yeah.
doing this? These children that sit in front of us every single day across the board. We don't have money for it. Why is the budget for police training so low in this city that the superintendent's crying out all the things we want to do, but we don't have a budget to do the training? Well, damn it, if we say this is important, we got to find the money. We can find the money for anything we want in this city. We ought to find it for schools, and we ought to find it for police training, and then some programs that bring them together. I don't believe it's not there.
I have another question from the audience. It is, we've heard a lot about reinvestment and prevention services. Where can or should this money come from? In other words, who are the public officials we need to put pressure on to make the resources available? That's a good one for all of you.
Is everybody. So we're talking about from the city of Chicago, the county, the state that's dysfunctional, and of course the feds. And the challenge is that, as Father Flaker just intimated, is that there has to be a will to do this. Unfortunately, we've seen so much disinvestment in our community that it's just alarming. When you look at South Side and West Side, and then you go north, and even from where I just shared earlier about when I was in Cabrini Green pastoring at Wayman AME Church, and I went over there just a few months ago, and I was amazed at the gentrification that had taken place, that when I was there in the community, there was a plan for transformation. And the sad part about it is the folk that were in the community got moved out, and I won't even say where they went to, but they may say is a correlation between what's taking place in our community versus the dismantling of public housing. And so the challenge is that, as we've all noted, public officials have to be accountable, because part of the problem is with what has happened is with public officials in terms of governmental resources being dried up. And unfortunately, I guess the thought is you're building buildings, but you're not building people. And that's the unfortunate part about it.
I had a meeting with State Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, and he asked me real poignantly, he said, what can we as Republicans do for black people? And
Get some black Republicans.
yeah. That was the question he asked me. And I said, our primary concern is that you're really missing the middle class proponent of African Americans. You're really missing the opportunities that persist. If you were to give some foreclosure forgiveness, you forgave everybody else during the foreclosure process, and if you would eliminate student loan debt, you would create an opportunity for the black middle class to become an investor in communities. So now, and I think Alderman Sawyer said this, now if I got a 2-flat or a 3-flat that I'm invested in Inglewood, I become a part of that community that I used to grow up in. And now I'm an investor, and I'm getting dollars for that's paying my mortgage. Then we all are real not good at saving money. I'm gonna go spend some more money because now I got my mortgage freed up, and now I've created jobs. And then when I create those jobs, you create this economical windfall that starts going to create jobs, build communities, and things like that. And when the economy gets stimulated, now money that's being allocated to give aid to people now could be shifted to helping people. And those are where the resources come from. But with an economy that is not functionable and it only helps support or people on assistance, that's government and poor people, we will never get to the point where there'll be money in budgets to do the things that's necessary. So you're talking about legislation, you're talking about a larger conversation, larger than this room, for us to change the dynamic of how we think and process as relates to one of the key things that we have not spoken about in this is the poverty. It's a high cost to low living. And it takes a lot of money. It costs you a lot of money to be poor. And we need to talk about how much we're spending just to be broke. And if you deal with that issue, because everything costs more money in the hood than anywhere else. And so we start talking about that, then I think the resources are available when we start concentrate on that, because the dollar has the power to bring people together regardless of race, religion, lack of. We come together around money.
Jay Dean, Bishop Dukes, Peggy, Reverend Johnson, and Father Mike, thank you. Thank you for being there. Thank you for doing everything you're doing. You're the wall that somebody keeps talking about in Washington. You're the wall this is gonna fix this problem, thanks to you. Please give them a hand.